Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Hallmarkies podcast. And we are really excited. This is a bonus episode. We are going to start recapping the new And Just Like That series. And we'll probably do every 2 episodes like we have done with some other shows that we've recapped. And this is our reboot of the Sex and the City show. And it's been a long time coming. We're really excited about it. And I'm film critic Rachel Wagner, and Jax is here.
Rachel, thank you so much for inviting me to do this and to have an excuse to stay up really late so that we could watch this the moment that it dropped and crashed HBO Max.
Yeah, we were thinking at first, oh well, we'll wait a little bit, and then we saw of course the hype around it, that it's like, no, we need to talk about this right away. Yeah, and HBO Max completely shut down for like an hour, a good hour. So yeah, there's a lot of interest.
Both of us were like, good night, and then we're like, up.
Yeah. Yeah, and you are coming from the Big Apple right now, so this has gotta be special for you.
It's really special, and I do have to say that I did wear, and if you'll remember, the original Sex and the City, Carrie tells Berger that Manhattan women don't wear scrunchies, and they're making a comeback. So I did that on today. I have on I'm a Marantha sweatshirt that I ordered from a podcast that's really funny. It's called Couldn't Help But Wonder. And they're 2 comedians that covered all of Sex and the City. It's a really funny podcast. So I was definitely in the mode, really excited to chat about this with you because I knew you'd have a lot to say.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. And I do want to say outright that this will be a more mature podcast than maybe we typically have. So if that's not your jam, this is a mature show. So we literally post 2 other episodes today. So there's plenty to listen to if that's not something you enjoy. So I guess we should start out by talking about the original show, our feelings about the show, maybe even the movies. So you've listened to the podcast about it. You were a pretty big fan of the original show.
Yeah, I didn't watch it in real time. I recently went through all of it when we were in quarantine, but I had seen episodes here or there. But I remember when I was going to move to New York, my idea in my head was that I was going to have this exciting life like they do on Sex and the City. I didn't even really know what that meant, but I knew that they were 4 women who seemed to have a lot of fun together and their lives seemed really glamorous. And one time, my confession about this is I used to write some freelance dating column stuff for the Washington Post, and someone left a scathing review of something that I had written. They thought it was scathing, and they said, she's a wannabe bargain basement Carrie Bradshaw. And I said, thank you.
Right.
That's the best thing you could say. They meant it as an insult, but I took it as a compliment. So yeah, I had issues with the fact that the Sex and the City was so whitewashed, and there were a lot of problematic things that were in the first 6 seasons or in the original Sex and the City. But I think they tried to rectify this, so that made me happy. But what was your relationship with Sex and the City, and which one are you?
Yeah, so it is a show that I also started later. I actually started watching it when they would have the reruns, kind of the edited reruns on TBS, I think it was. And so I haven't seen every single episode. I would like to. And that's something that once I have like some free time, I'd like to binge watch the series. But yeah, I really appreciate that it was a show about strong women and it was really a show about friendship. And friendship is so important to women. And it's something that's hardly ever really kind of profiled or talked about, or, that it's even, we cover Hallmark movies, and that's amazing. But we focus on relationships, on romantic relationships for the most of what we do. And yet I think that you could make a case that friendship for women in particular is as important, if not more important, than their romantic relationships. And it's just hardly ever talked about. And I understand the criticisms, and we're going to talk about how they kind of dealt with those criticisms in this show. But I feel like I'm not excusing it, but I'm just saying that I don't think every show can be everything to everyone. So could they have done better? Yes, but I still think it was a really fun show for women to just kind of, there was an escapist quality to the show. The idea of going to New York and being like a blogger, and having these great friends and having these great clothes and all that stuff. I think that's important. I think it's good to have. And so yeah, I enjoy the show, and I think I've always figured that I was probably a Charlotte.
I think you're Charlotte. I think you're in a good way. I love Charlotte.
Yeah, because I'm not a Miranda. I work hard like Miranda, but I don't know. I'm just not a business person. And we'll talk about what they did with her character, which is interesting. I mean, Carrie, though, when she's like, we're going to talk about all the podcasting stuff. And I'm like, maybe I am a Carrie.
Well, I actually think even with the original series, you could be a Charlotte Carrie hybrid, and the fact that Carrie is a lot of hustle. She is in a very creative industry where she generates all her own work. I mean, I do think you can be a hybrid, and I do think that you are a bit of a hybrid.
Definitely not a Samantha. I'm not not confident when it comes to relationships with men like she is. I think that's a nice way to describe it, right? Confident.
Yeah, I think to be a Samantha, which I really admire, I think that if you're a Samantha, you don't question it. Like right, and I'm not either.
Yeah. So you mean you have your shirt? So are you do you say you're a Samantha Miranda hybrid?
No, this is just the only shirt they sold, and I want to support their podcast. So this was the only one they had. I think I am. I mean, honestly, I don't know. I've little snippets of Charlotte, but then I do think I have a lot of Miranda's, like the way Miranda sort of, I think, treats, how do I say this? Men, I can relate to, and the fact that I think that she's very focused on her female friendships and her career a little bit more than her romantic relationships. And that's something that I can definitely relate to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Well, so if you followed the show at all, you know that things did not end well for Sarah Jessica Parker and Kim Cattrall in particular, that they had a falling out, and there was no way in heck that she was going to be on this show. That was not happening. So that was something they obviously had to deal with from the beginning, that what are we going to do about Samantha? And so their sort of solution was to have her be in London, have her be kind of estranged from the group. What did you think about how they kind of did that?
Okay. I was surprised by how they did it. I feel like they addressed it, what felt like, in some ways, I don't know if I enjoyed this or if it made me uncomfortable or a little bit of both, but it felt like very close to home, or like the actual reality of the situation, which in some ways I appreciated that they addressed it up at the top, head on, and throughout the episodes.
Yeah.
But it did feel a little bit like the line felt blurred between the show
Yeah.
and real life. And I don't necessarily think that's a problem. It just made me go, ooh. What about
Yeah.
you?
It definitely felt like they were trolling Kim Cattrall a little bit throughout the episodes.
Yeah.
And honestly, when the first like half of the first episode, I was like, oh, this is not good. This is not good. Like I felt like they were trying too hard to apologize and compensate for what had been the criticisms, like you mentioned, of the original show. And yeah, I don't know, just like some kind of cringeworthy type conversations between them, like explaining their the lack of diversity and it's sort of their past and the way that they handled Samantha, at first having this lady come up, oh, I just assumed that everybody who's not here has passed on, and just this kind of cringy sort of scene. And so yeah, I was nervous at first, but I do think once the actual meat, we'll talk about, this is spoiler filled recaps, just so everyone knows what
Yeah, and like
happened.
they're actual spoilers. That's what's
Yeah,
funny. Like they're
right.
it is just wrought with things that happen.
Yeah. And so yeah, I thought that was not the best, the way that they kind of approached it. I mean, it's tough. It's a tough situation. What are you going to say? I think having her be in London is fine, but I don't understand why they needed to then, like you're saying, make it some kind of estrangement. Why not have her just be in London?
Yeah, the trolling aspect is interesting, or even the whole thing where they're clearly addressing these criticisms. When you have a show that is so much more than a show, it's a cultural movement that it's taken on its own life that is separate to the show. It's interesting when things start to get self-referential, and then at what point it can get messy. And I don't know if in this it bothered me, these things where it was so clear to me that they were trying to poke fun at themselves as characters, but also acknowledge that they hadn't done it before in what felt like a very obvious way. But I don't know. I actually left this with more questions than answers about how I felt about what was going on. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. I did too. And uh I mean, hopefully that they just kind of drop it. I hope this isn't continuing, like every episode we get like a Samantha, kind of a thing. That would be bad. Hopefully
Yeah.
not. Hopefully this is just, they get it out of the way and they move on. We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast.
Sometimes love needs a little push. Lizzie Shane, the award-winning author of The 12 Dogs of Christmas, has a brand new small-town romance set in Pine Hollow, Vermont, where every happily ever after begins with adopting an adorable rescue dog.
First love gets a second chance into All the Dogs I've Loved Before when the town librarian, mischievous Australian Shepherd, keeps getting loose and fetching her ex, the town sheriff.
Lizzie Shane's Pine Hollow series has been called an irresistible blend of heart, humor, and a whole lot of puppy love.
And To All the Dogs I've Loved Before is available now wherever books are sold.
To learn more, visit www.lizzieshane.com.
That's lizzieshane.com. We find out Miranda. Let's just talk about each of the women individually and their sort of arc over this first episode. So Miranda, the big thing that we're introduced to her is that she is letting her hair go gray, and Charlotte's like, oh, don't do that. But especially in the second episode, I think she was rocking the gray. It looked great.
Yeah, and honestly, I, I think oddly, this was probably one of the conversations that bothered me the most. I don't even think that's, I just thought her hair looked good, and I don't think we need
Yeah.
to be talking about women's hair that much. Like weirdly, the things with Samantha, even some of the things with woke culture, I think that you can look at all the reasons why it might be there. I felt like this was a completely needless conversation. She
Yeah.
looks good, and I didn't think we needed to just point that out. It felt a little like to
Well,
me.
and Miranda was never like the fashionista of the group. So it's not like it's sort of a big part of her character or personality. And I would say in general, the fashion was disappointing in this show. I didn't really see anything aside from maybe Charlotte's dress for the, or Lily's dress really for the recital.
Ditto. That
Yeah.
was that was it for me. And but it was, and could that gal wear when she was tickling those ivories? I was like, that dress is beautiful. That's iconic. That's the only piece. I completely agree.
Yeah, and this, I mean, and I guess Carrie's dress for the funeral was somewhat of a statement, but I don't know, it was just disappointing because that was like such a fun part of the show. Is like, what is the next pair of shoes and what is the next kind of outfit that, and I think that that was kind of them trying to again address all of these criticisms and stuff. But like, I think that's dumb because the fashion porn was part of what made the show fun.
Yeah, and something that we look forward to when we were watching, although I
Yeah.
will say that it, I liked, like, there were certain fashions that I liked, not in terms of what we're used to seeing them rock, but like I loved what Miranda's professor was wearing in the scene on the subway where she got mauled by Chucky, um, which was terrifying. But yeah, as far as like our, well, they're not the core four anymore, but as far as like our the three women, I was not impressed by their fashions
Yeah.
overall.
And I feel like it was a missed opportunity because they acknowledged COVID, they acknowledged the pandemic in this show. So it's not like, say, with Hallmark movies where they pretend like it doesn't exist. And they acknowledge it, but yet nobody in New York City is wearing a mask in any shot that I could see, maybe in some like background or whatever, but nobody I could see, and none of them. And I feel like that's was a major missed opportunity. It could have been really a fun way to show sort of their fashion by having like, sort of creative masks or something like that. I mean, I was just, you live in New York City, so you can speak to this, but I was just there and I have never had to show my vaccination card more in my life than in New York City. Everywhere. I mean, to get a Starbucks, you had to show it. I mean, everywhere. And everyone had masks there. And so I feel like that was a missed opportunity that they could have had fun with and also been relevant.
Yeah, and you have to wear a mask on the subway in New York. Like, I feel like, to your point about the vaccination cards, if you are vaccinated and they're recommending that you wear masks indoors, but not everyone is. But on the subway, you have to, and everyone is. I thought it was interesting in the beginning, Carrie acknowledged the pandemic with the whole 6 feet apart. I'm wondering if when they were filming this, they thought, oh, by the time we release it in December, this will all be a thing, distant memory, and we won't be wearing masks in New York anymore. And it's taking place currently. But yeah, no, we're still doing the thing. And I think we'll continue to do so for quite a long time.
Yeah, it seems like it. But yeah, so Miranda, she has decided to go back to school to get a master's degree in human rights law, I think is what they said. I don't really understand this, to be honest. I mean, she says that, well, she saw the after the Muslim ban, she saw all the lawyers doing all of this good, work, helping the immigrants, and then so she wanted to not be part of the problem. But I don't really understand why that would require her to go back to school if she's a lawyer. she's passed, you know, the bar. She's an accredited whatever they lawyer. So just help people. Like I don't like, I feel like having a master's degree would mean nothing as far as being able to help people more. So it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, that didn't track for me either. I think it felt like she wasn't being honest with the fact that she just wants this for her own personal journey, which I think is valuable, and we all need to do things for ourselves as well, but that didn't track. But in that scene where she shows up, I laughed so hard at the line when Miranda refers to one of the people in class and says he, and then the person says, well, a little quick on the pronouns there. And it was so funny because there wasn't any from the person and the actor, the way that it was played, it wasn't judgmental. It was almost with this little smirk and
Yeah.
bemusement at the disaster that they knew was going to go down before our very eyes. And I was cackling during that whole mess.
Yeah, it was a mess. And I agree, that was probably the best part of it. I didn't really ever see Miranda as being such a what's a good word for it? Just I really didn't see her as being such a mess. I always thought she was so pulled together, and I guess they're trying to kind of change her character, but I don't know. Like it was, again, felt like maybe a little overcompensating for their worries about the criticisms of the show to take this character and have her be like super cringy. And yeah, I mean, she's going to learn and grow through the course of the season, and I appreciate that. But it felt a little on the nose to me, that whole sequence.
It felt on the nose for sure. And also, I feel like Miranda, out of the original four, was always the best at, in situations with her friends, was always really good at not centering herself in the situation. I mean, as we'll see later, Charlotte, as loving as she is very guilty of doing that and for turning a situation and making it about her, not because she's not sweet, but because of all sorts of things. And I felt like Miranda was always really good about not making things all about her. And she took this situation, and I think what would have been funny is a very clear faux pas that went weird, and then the monologue again, sort of the way she does, like, I have taken up enough of your time, I'm done now. And I wanted that to actually be where she was just done and she shut up and she listened for the rest of the episode, but she kept trying to engage their professor and take up more time and prove that she wasn't a Karen, therefore making her even more of a Karen.
Yeah. When I feel like if you're trying to make your character more, I don't know, for lack of a better word, more woke, you know, and more aware, socially aware, I feel like going back to school and getting in kind of an elitist environment, right? That like, that's the last thing that, you know, that obviously she has the resources to be able to do something kind of self-indulgent. Is this, and she says, oh, wearing a pink, you know, pussy hat, it wasn't cutting it. Well, I feel like going to those protests is probably more effective than getting a master's degree from, you know, like
Columbia.
Clearly this is a very expensive school. I don't know if they said which school it was. It was NY.
It was
Columbia. Yeah. So going to Columbia where they have a class with what, like 12 people in it, you know, I mean, that's very elitist. And I have a master's degree, so I'm not throwing shade. I'm just saying that as the writers of the show, if that's what they were trying to do to show that Miranda has more empathy now and is trying to be a better person, I don't think it really lands very well.
Thank you for pointing that out, because that's something that a lot of people who have these discussions about privilege don't talk about educational privilege enough, because a lot of the people who have the discussions on privilege have educational privilege and they are not good at seeing the privileges that they have. And this is myself included in that. And I think that it's a really good point that why is this the thing that she's doing?
And I can't think of anything that you could do with a master's degree in human rights law that you couldn't also do just being a lawyer. Like there's no reason to go back to school. Anyway, yeah, so that was weird. She's also having problems at home. Her and Steve are kind of, I think, not communicating very well. Do you agree?
Yeah, and it also might have to do something with the fact that Steve is literally losing his hearing. I was worried about him. I mean, he looks great though, and he's so funny, and I love his voice. He's so charming. He's such a cutie.
I'm a little worried that they're going to go down the with this Chaz character. I'm a little worried that they're going to have Miranda at least be tempted. Because it's probably tempting to write that into the character, because since Cynthia Nixon is LGBTQ person, to write that into Miranda's character. But I would feel really sad because I always really liked her at Steve.
Yeah, and also I did see them sort of laying the groundwork for that, and I wanted to be like, okay, maybe Miranda is attracted. Like, I don't see the reverse. Like, there's no way that Che would ever be attracted to Miranda. No offense to Miranda. That makes sense. And
yeah, no, I agree.
We're trying to, I mean, Che's just this, hilarious, attractive, vibrant person who's really open. And not saying that Miranda doesn't have a lot to offer, but I don't think that is the offering that Che is looking for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree. And I really appreciate that they cast Sarah Ramirez, who's a trans actor. I think that's great in that role. And we'll talk about when we talk about Carrie, we talk about her more there. But yeah, I can see that. And I also felt like the whole thing with her son really landed flat, because there's no way that any parent would allow, like, I understand that parents will allow their children to, to have relations, like, and not that you can say yes or no, but just in their home and everything, but like while they're there and being allowed, like, I just felt like that was a lot. I don't feel like any parent would put up with that.
I will say, I am like, I was, it was a lot. Yes, it was a lot for me, and I'm pretty open in theory, but it was even just so loud. It just everything about it. And for me, it was jarring because I love the safety first, that he is practicing safe sex. You don't want to shame people, and I want to be sex positive, but it was just the fact that we also, had you watched the original show and even now, this is Brady. He was baby Brady.
Right.
I don't even think of him as an adult now. I don't know how old he's playing, if it's 18, but to me,
they said 17 when she's got the pot, the whole pot situation. I think she said 17, my 17-year-old.
You're right. So he's not even quite an adult, which is probably why it left me with a little bit of a strange feeling.
Yeah, it didn't feel believable or real. I can't think of any parent, no matter how hipster they're trying to be, how modern they're trying to be, that would allow that. And that would, I mean, and then it makes no sense when she's all like, how dare you smoke pot? Like, well, what are you doing? I don't know, like, pick a lane, I guess I would say, for Miranda. But yeah. Well, let's talk about Carrie. So in these two episodes, so Carrie, she had a Instagram account that went viral, became popular, which totally feels legit. I would follow her Instagram. Totally.
That felt real to me.
Yeah.
Real. He also, because we're living in the same world of Sex and the City, she had this huge column, and it's really what's happening now. Like, of course, we still follow Carrie. We want to know what Carrie's doing and changing with the times and how she's evolved. It definitely felt right to me.
And so now she's also on a podcast. And how did you, as a podcaster, how did you feel like they did with that whole dynamic?
I mean, again, I thought, like what you were saying about the woke culture stuff, it was like they kept pushing things with the podcasting. Like, everyone's got a podcast now, podcasting. That just felt like they were trying to be like, this is current. And not only do we know it's current, but we're being self-referential. And isn't that cheeky? And then you get caught up in this thing where you're forgetting what the actual storyline is, because it feels like they're trying to sell you some weird thing. Although I will say, the podcast itself, when they were recording it, chef's kiss moment, especially the three of them are bantering back and forth. I think it's funny. And then when Carrie is just so clearly not fitting into, like, I wrote down this line that made me laugh so hard when she said, oh, maybe I didn't write it down, but basically when she tries to not answer personal questions and then she laughs it off and thinking like everyone's gonna laugh, it's like, no, you're actually here to talk about that stuff.
It was really interesting because when the show came out, when Sex and the City came out, it was a very R-rated show for a mature show. But I thought it was interesting here. They have now Carrie kind of thrust into an environment where she's very uncomfortable. And so I felt like it was kind of like what was shocking then is so not shocking now, that like she almost seems like old-fashioned, which is like interesting because it hasn't been that long, and maybe they laid that on a little thick, but when she's talking about I'm not interested in being raunchy and being gross, and I like, yeah, that's true. The show, I mean, the only character that really was raunchy on the show would have been Samantha. She was the only one that kind of crossed that line sometimes.
Yeah, and I think but I do think the thing that was also interesting about that is, well, the raunchiness aspect, yes, but I wish that Carrie was a little bit more progressive in the way she could talk about pleasure that you can give yourself. And I think that because there's so much of the show that has been like female friendship and being okay on your own.
Yeah.
And that it seems interesting that, okay, she's okay talking about having interactions with another human, but when it's put on her and what does she do just to make herself feel good, that's when she gets uncomfortable.
But it almost seemed like she was uncomfortable with that at all, like even her life, not just talking about it, but even in her life, you know, that we have the scene with her in Big. And I thought that was actually a pretty fun scene, pretty funny. And when and all the interactions, I mean, it made it all the more sad when happened in the next episode. But yeah, that I just thought they had some funny interactions when he was like, I remember when you kept your sweaters in the stove, in the oven. And just some of their back and forth. And I think that, yeah, that she's more of a traditionalist than, like, I feel like maybe Carrie might actually, we always figured Charlotte would be the one that would be into Hallmark movies, but maybe Carrie actually would be too. I'm thinking now.
I think you're spot on.
Yeah.
I agree with you completely.
We did get one small scene where she goes through her closet and she says, "Hello, lovers," to her shoes. I wanted more of that. More.
Oh, Rachel, I did too. And how glorious it is. I mean, I do not know. I couldn't even tell you how much money that apartment would cost in New York, but the size of that and just the exquisite nature of that closet. I mean, it was beautiful. That's what we needed. That's what we wanted.
Because they went too far in the second movie. The second movie is terrible. It's not good. They went too far with the fashion porn. They went too far with them just being completely clueless to any kind of cultural sensitivity or any kind of, they go to Dubai. It was bad. It was really bad. But then I feel like maybe they've overcorrected because we didn't like that escapism of the show.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the thing is, we're watching this for that escapism. That's part of the reason, like you said, with the Hallmark movies, like this is part of the reason we watch to have a lot of the magic. So I hope we see more of that closet and more of her lovers being her shoes.
Well, let's talk about Charlotte. And so she has the two girls, as we know. Lily is like a concert pianist, studying to be a concert pianist, and there's this big concert she wants Carrie to go to. And I did think it was funny when we find out that Charlotte is the only one that listens to Carrie's podcast, and Miranda's like, I love you to death, but I draw the line at podcast, which is totally accurate to my life. Like my nobody in my family listens to any of my podcasts, none, which I have a lot and I get that, but like not any, zero. Like my aunt Katie listens sometimes. My niece, she will comment on my writing, so I appreciate that. She reads my reviews. But other than that, it's pretty slim pickings in my life. And I think that's probably pretty true of podcasters in general. Their families and friends are just kind of like, no, sorry.
I love that you point that out and that it's like you can think of the very few examples of people. Yeah, I think that's very relatable and also makes complete sense that Charlotte would be the one that as soon as a new episode comes out, while she's doing every other thing, she puts it on, sends it, is like, it was great, Carrie, and texts her right after. Like, definitely that's on point, but yeah, everyone else is not gonna be doing that.
Yeah, and I think that Charlotte probably, oddly enough, I think transfers best to 2021. And I don't know if it's just because she has her two girls, or I don't know. I just feel like her character was like, yes, this is how her character would behave in 2021. It's accurate. And I just love her relationship with Harry. It's so sweet. It's one of the best parts of the show. And I was just so glad that they didn't go somewhere dark with that, because that would suck.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there are some things that we know that we need. And I love that you can tell that Charlotte and Lily are so clearly bonded. Like that was sort of always the daughter that Charlotte pictured herself having. Mm-hmm. And Harry understands. It doesn't mean she doesn't love her other daughter. And I think it's going to be great getting into that storyline more. But you can see that Harry probably has to hold a lot of space and manage a lot of the dynamics with the whole family unit, if that makes sense. And he's such a fun dad.
Looks like skateboarding in the house and just but like still kind of a nerd and still kind of awkward, but they are awkward and they just love each other so much, which was great to see.
Yeah. And that marriage, well, I'm sure it has taken work, as all relationships do. I don't think they've ever had that moment where it's like, okay, we're done. I think they are solid. I think they're good. And if anything happens for the rest of the season, take that away from us, I agree. I will not be happy with that.
Yeah, definitely. So I forgot to say, I did die laughing when Big says that he's like, that's some Bridgerton there. That made me laugh. It's like, yeah. Like Bridget has ruined all relationships, I swear. 2021.
He got it. He was like, yeah, I mean, hey, it's like he was proud of his cultural reference of the
Yeah.
moment.
I felt that too. That was a really funny moment. I enjoyed that. And so then we saw Willie Garson, which was so sad. Stanford.
Oh,
Oh,
Rachel, I mean, so as we'll talk about when we get even further on, but yeah, when we did see him get out of the car, and also knowing that when he filmed this, he was ill already, and
yeah.
then all the things later on that happens when they're talking about being grateful to still be alive and be together. It was oh, I mean, yes, it was early in the morning / late at night, but we all knew this was coming and that he was such a beloved actor and member of that show, and everything about it was great that he got to film this before he passed, but it hit hard.
Yeah, agreed. And I felt kind of bad that they kind of have him like fighting the whole time. Like I wish they had, uh obviously they didn't know, what was going on, but I was just kind of like, oh, I wish that they had made other choices for his character, but nevertheless, I was really glad to see him. And so yeah, Stanford and Hot Fellas Bread, that made me laugh.
Yes.
That was good. Uh, so then the episode ends with Lily playing her amazing recital. Like she's an incredible pianist. And Big is there alone. They were going to go off and go to the Hamptons, but they were going to wait until after the recital. And he's on his Peloton, and he has a heart attack. And I feel like this is a very strange product placement for Peloton. Like you really want to have like your product name dropped in a character who dies like minutes after using your product. Like that's a weird flex.
You know, oh, sorry. For people that are just listening and not watching. I have nothing else to add than the fact that I completely agree with you, and I'm laughing so hard I'm nearly crying. I don't understand because I don't have Peloton. I don't plan on getting one. However, I've always thought they seem cool, and
Yeah.
watching this, you actively or at least I felt like I actively don't want to get on one now.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. It was very strange. I don't know. But it was horrible, very sad, and very weird how they staged it, because I thought that she was going to come home and he would be dead, and the way that they had set it up with the shower and him feeling his arm and everything, which doesn't always happen. People think that has to happen for a heart attack, especially with women. It doesn't normally happen when you have. That's why women die more of heart attacks, one of the many reasons, than men, because we don't recognize the different signs that for a women having a heart attack versus having a man having a heart attack. But for a man, they do a lot of times have that arm thing. And but anyway, so he feels that, and so I thought, oh, she's gonna come home and he's gonna be dead, but instead he was like almost dead, which was like a little weird. It's sad, of course.
It was, so this for me was very confusing, and this was one of the moments that I was really eager to talk to you about this so quickly after watching, because in some ways I found it to be very real and raw in the way that it was staged and tragic, and I was crying and all these things. But then I had other questions about, even you're saying like, okay, he's almost dead, or does she just think he's alive, but he's but
In fact,
and
he
he
kind of like nodded to her and like
yes,
he
and he
moved.
moved his hand a little. But
Yeah.
then I was like, are we seeing it through her lens where she's just trying to ascertain what's happened? And do you know what I'm saying? I just went places with it,
Yeah.
but she didn't make any move to call anyone
Yeah.
right away.
Like when they show people getting the body, it looks like paramedics. So I guess we're supposed to assume that she did eventually, but yeah, she just kind of sat there when he was like alive. So
Yeah.
you'd call and I guess they were supposed to, like, his phone didn't work because it was in the shower or something like that. But I would think he would have at least tried to see if it would work to call 911, when he's experiencing it. But yeah, that was odd. There was like, why didn't you call 911 immediately?
Yeah, and it was I will say though, it was the way that it was done and the way that it was played, I did think it was powerful. Um in that, I mean, sort of the whole what we all have to come to terms with in life. It's the whole, and just like that, it changes, someone's gone and you're grieving. And the way her friends were able to show up for her immediately in that moment and showed they really are family for each other
Yeah.
was another one of those big hug cuddle moments that I really loved.
Yeah, and I think that they probably want to have one of the characters that they can explore, like dating in 2021 and, kind of a thing. And it's a shame because Big and Carrie were like such a part of the show that they have to be really careful about how they approach that now and give her enough like grieving time and everything like that. But it's, I think, a shame because I would have been interested to see more about how their marriage works.
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/hallmarkies.
You don't see that many childless couples with a great marriage on television. I mean, I can't think of hardly any. And that was the other thing that was interesting about the show was that I can't think of hardly any shows / movies where your lead characters are in their 50s. I can think of a lot of younger shows. I can think of older shows, something like Golden Girls or, something like that are older. But to have the characters in their 50s is kind of, I thought it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I agree. And the fact that Carrie is feeling like she's sort of in between worlds when she's searching the site about now that Big has passed and she's trying to deal with her new role, planning the funeral and being a widow, and all the footage she's watching is of people who are clearly a lot older than her that have lost a spouse. So she's in this strange situation where dating for her now, if she does it, but even just existing in this world where she's lost her husband fairly young, but she's not in a space in her life where she would be having kids again or looking for that sort of next partnership.
Yeah.
It's an interesting place to be in that I think it will be, if done well, it will be fascinating to watch her explore that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be good. And the see, I did also, like you said, loved this the support of Miranda and Charlotte for Carrie, that Miranda is immediately over there. And you have this interesting dynamic with Charlotte, who feels like it's her fault because she had Carrie at the recital instead of being with Big when she could have maybe done more. And that's very natural. I think we all, whenever somebody we love dies, we go through those grieving stages. And so Charlotte, it was maybe a little over the top, but I think it was true to her character. And I just thought them actually like sleeping in the same bed with her was so sweet and lovely.
I loved that as well. And the fact that they're like, oh, it's my night. Like clearly they've worked out a schedule where she's not going to have to be alone. And that they've come together. It's not just, oh, we're here for the first day and I'm sleeping in the bed with you and taking care of you. It's like Miranda and Charlotte have worked out probably a schedule because they have busy lives, but they're making sure that Carrie doesn't have to be alone at night. And I thought that was really great. And then the flowers from Samantha, I actually really did love that.
Yeah, that was good. I liked that too. And then I think it was Steve who says, it was either Steve or Miranda, I can't remember. They both spoke at the funeral. And they say death is the saddest part of life, but it's an important part of life because it gives us a chance to remember. So that was sweet. And then Miranda, I think it was Miranda, says that he will leave a big hole, which was was good. And for today, let us remember how lucky we are. And then Big's brother speaks, and he says Big had never been happier in his life. So way to go. That we forgot to mention that these two episodes were heavy on the Todd Rundgren. Hello, it's me. New favorite song. Who knew?
Who knew?
Yeah. So it's because they listened to it in the first episode, and then they have the slideshow, which was very sweet with this.
It was sweet, and getting to see Brady sort of put his head down in their family unit and they're all together, and seeing that these people, I mean, now I'm getting emotional, but that these people have created a community really was really meaningful here. And the fact that they're all coming together for Carrie in her time of grief. But when that line where she's like, and just like that Big died, I mean, we went through, years of them, Mr. Big, he was always this through line. And then when she screams John at the end, like we found out that was his name at the end of the series, but thinking about all the years that we've had that we didn't get to see, now we're not going to get to see any more of the two of them together. I was hoping that Natasha, his wife, before Carrie, was going to show up at the funeral.
Oh, that would have been good.
Yeah.
It was kind of jarring when she's calling out John, and then at the funeral they're referring, and it was like, oh wow. Yeah. And then Gloria, she's just lost it. She's sobbing in the funeral. But I think that's true to life. People just respond differently, to death and to funerals and things like that. Some people are, some people hold it all in. Other people are a mess.
Yeah. And I love that she acknowledged Gloria when she said all of the other guys got rid of their older secretaries and he kept me on. And I thought it said something about Big and about how Big has grown and evolved over the years and what kind of man he actually was or became, I really think it said a lot.
Yeah. And so then we get this whole scene that with Miranda getting mad at Brady and at Chase for smoking pot. And I feel like that if I was Brady, I would be really confused because I don't know. I mean, what I would be morally confused about what my mother expects of me if like, well, I'm allowed to have loud sex with my girlfriend in the house while my parents are present. But I can't have smoke a joint. Like what?
Yeah, and the thing is,
That's like legal. It's legal, I think, in New York, right?
yeah, or okay, so I think it is, if not legal, it's decriminalized. I think it's legal now. I'm not sure, but either way, to your point, he's not going to get in legal trouble for it. So either way, and when he says, he doesn't even look caught. Like it's not like he's taking a swig of, a thing of whiskey and he's like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. He's like, oh, I was just really stressed out and sad and I was doing this, and made it seem like it might be something that he's open about doing, but Miranda doesn't want him doing it in public. All of that seemed confusing to me.
Yeah, it was confusing because I mean, I wouldn't want my child to be smoking pot at 17. I get that. I wouldn't but I feel like I would be more sort of morally consistent with my expectations, and then we'd have a discussion and we talk about it. Whereas I feel like she's just all over the place with what she's expecting out of Brady.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely. I think poor Brady is probably just like, okay, it seems like a genuinely sweet kid ultimately.
Yeah. So then when they get back to the apartment and there's just tons of gifts and items, and I did think it was a funny line, what part of no flowers to orchid people not understand. That's good.
It was really good. Yeah.
And then they have this whole scene where Miranda tries to apologize to this professor, and then this bizarre scene where, like you said, the problem child with Chucky, whatever, tries to steal from her, and then Miranda's like, oh, I would have helped, but I didn't want to seem too woke or whatever. And I was like, what? I don't know. It was weird. It was a weird scene altogether.
It was weird because it was almost like we were expected to now be like, oh, that's Miranda's redemption. But it shouldn't be. Like,
No.
all of it felt weird. And the situation where when Miranda, I'm okay with her not getting it, right? But she needs to not get it in the first scene, sit down, and then shut up and learn for the rest of it.
Yeah.
But
I mean, the idea of not helping someone because you don't want to be seen as a white savior is like privilege in and of itself. Like that's ridiculous. And like the correct answer is, if somebody's getting mugged and you have the chance to help with the situation, you help with the situation. That's the not racist choice, right?
Yeah.
You just you innately, your feeling of humanity for this other person, you innately help them, right? And if they take that as being some kind of white privilege, the fact that you help them to not get mugged, then that's on them. That's on them. You did the natural thing. And so like actually start talking yourself out of helping somebody that's Black because you don't want to be seen as a white savior is like way worse than being a white savior.
I totally agree with you. And I think that for Miranda to act like it's the same thing as when the professor is showing her ID, which is not a big deal.
Right.
It's like, oh, I'm looking for it. Like any of us would be looking for ID and being like, oh, this is kind of annoying. Like, I'm sorry, I know I have it. That security guard was sort of just doing his job. Everyone's got to show their ID. The professor knew that. The professor wasn't bothered by it. the professor was bothered by the fact that Miranda decided to make it her moment to stand on. It's like, and Miranda, if you can't see the difference between someone getting mugged and someone just having to follow all the rules that everyone else does, I don't know. You're further behind than you even think you are.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. And it just seems like a weird fit for Miranda because I don't know. She always seemed so capable and on top of things. So I don't know. It's a strange thing that they like. That's the way that they've decided to approach the backlash from the show, is to make Miranda kind of a mess. And I'm like, I don't know if it's really worked. That was definitely the most cringy thing about these 2 episodes for sure.
Yeah.
So
okay, sorry, plugging in my computer because I realized I was in battery saver mode. Okay, perfect. Yeah, I agree with it. That was just like, okay, well, and I think that the 3rd episode that has yet to come out will give us a really clear indication of where some of this stuff is going. And I hope that it's like they were setting it up so that they could address it and then maybe have more nuance to it instead of the way that it's being presented all at the top.
Yeah, I hope so too. And then we have this whole scene where Carrie wants to have Stanford there to help her, doesn't want to have Charlotte because Charlotte is very emotional. She's gotten the ashes for Big's ashes in the mail. And I feel like I understand Charlotte's feeling guilty and that we all have there's different reactions to things, but you also have to say, I have to let her have whoever she needs, my friend. I have to let her have whoever she needs with her. And because it's like you have to do your grieving process, but you also have to respect her and her grieving process. And so, Charlotte, she could improve in this way. And Carrie says, I am mad, but I'm mad at myself, not at you. And she can't sleep. But yeah, I thought that, it's like, Charlotte, come on, you can be a better friend than this.
Yeah. And to your point earlier that you made about how people grieve differently, I think Charlotte having all these breakdowns is very true to who she is, but I would have loved a little bit more screen time because we both love him. Her having the breakdowns to Harry and saying, I feel incredibly guilty. She's sobbing. And I mean, oh my gosh, like the acting chops on Kristen Davis, amazing. So I want those scenes where she's saying to Harry, it's all my fault. And she's falling apart and saying, but I don't want to say it to Carrie because Carrie's grieving. I don't want, because right now it's just coming across as selfish.
Yeah.
And centering yourself in a situation, just like Miranda's doing with her woke journey. You're worried more about your own feelings and how people view you or your own guilt than thinking about the actual person that's across from you. And I don't think that that's true for these characters. I think they'd be a little bit more selfless in these particular situations.
Yeah, I think so too. And I don't know. I just feel like all of these women are smart, competent women, would be a little bit more sort of self-aware and a little more like, just because they like sort of things that maybe are seen as sort of ditzy, like they like shopping, they like things like that, doesn't mean they actually are. Like that was one of the good things about the show, is that these were empowered, smart, wonderful women that, and this great friendship that they had. So I don't know, they just, the writing on the characters was a little, again, I felt like they were overcompensating in a lot of ways for what they saw as critiques of the show. But hopefully they kind of get that out of the system and, we'll move on. But what would you, these 2 episodes, what would you give? How many Manolo Blahniks out of 5 would you give this? And just like
First of all,
like
love
that.
it. I would give, okay, how many out of 5?
Yeah, out of 5. Yeah.
Okay, out of 5 pairs or 5 shoes. 5 shoes. I want
Yeah.
to make
5
sure.
shoes.
Okay,
5.
5 shoes. I would give it. I would give it 3 shoes. Maybe 2.75. I thought there was enough there that I was super entertained the whole time. I mean, even the line I would ask you if you clocked and what you thought of it. We're at the funeral. We're grieving big, but then one of the characters like, remember when he like treated her horribly? And that's another funny thing in the show and what people tend to do at funerals to see the wonderful things. So there was so much there that I'm intrigued about exploring. I love Charlotte's new friendship. Like they called her Black Charlotte, but I thought that it was interesting that, there is this woman that Charlotte can connect with that is like her. I think there's potential storylines there. I think there's enough going on that I'm definitely excited about watching the rest, but I'm hoping that they've, like you said, gotten some of it out of their system. How do you feel?
No, I agree. I think I would give it a 3. I think there's potential enough, because if it had been like total garbage, then I would just been like, nah, let's move on. Let's not cover it. But since there was enough here that I thought was interesting, enough good performances, enough, going forward, that while it was not perfect, I did feel sad, and I thought they did a good job, like, getting those emotions out of me. And so overall, I agree. I think a 3 out of 5 Nola blocks is fair. But hopefully that it improves and gets better as the season goes on. So we will see. Well, let us know if you are listening, what you thought of the 2 episodes when you get to see them, and how you think that do you feel optimistic about the upcoming season? We would love to know your thoughts. And if you have any thoughts about the different things we talked about, we'd love to hear that in the comment section or on Twitter. And Jax, where can people find you?
People can find me at Jacqueline Collier or at Jacqueline C Tweets, and sometimes on the Hallmarkies podcast.
Yes. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. So please take a look at that. And also make sure you're following the podcast at Hallmarkies Pod and Hallmarkies Podcast, all of our social media. And if you are listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews. And 5 stars, please. It would help us so much. And then also, if you're watching on YouTube, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate that so much. We also have the merch store. And today is the last day that you can get Christmas delivery on orders from the merch store. So don't miss out. They're super fun styles. You can be as fashionable as Carrie Bradshaw. Right. Go to the merch store.
More comfortable. I will say, as someone who got the sweatshirt, I was saying this last time, it's not one that you get and you put on, you're like, oh, this doesn't feel good. Yeah. It feels so cozy. Yeah. So I highly recommend it.
They do a really good job at TeePublic. So definitely please take a look. It helps us so much. And then also check out the Patreon group. We have so much fun. We have giveaways. We have the Facebook group, and we have our watch alongs. Next week, we have director David Weaver, who is coming on, and we're going to watch his movie Christmas Town. That's going to be so much fun. So please sign up for the Patreon. We would appreciate it so much. And thanks so much. This was so much fun. And we'll see what happens. We'll probably, it'll be 2 weeks, and then we will record another update, but we'll keep you posted, and let us know what you think. If you like this idea that we're covering this, we would love to know your thoughts. So thanks so much, everybody. We'll talk to you later. Bye.